What lies behind the Great Wall? In recent times, Chairman Mao reinforced the image of a land of mystery. Soon, there will be 100 million mobile phones. More than 3,000 TV stations, millions of internet users, and 1,000 cities. Change is not just in cities, it is sweeping over the countryside. So what is driving this change? 20 years ago, China threw open its doors to trade. Trade and ideas travel hand in hand. Is China now being open to outside influences for the first time? The Great Wall has always appeared to be an impregnable barrier. In fact, it was a failure. It did not keep foreigners out, and it did not keep the Chinese in. Through its reopened doors, astonishing new evidence has emerged of centuries of exchange, in which China changed the world, and the world changed China. Professors Liu Hongliang and Idris Abudarussul are archaeologists. Their dig in Xinjiang in northwest China compares in size to Western Europe.
The Silk Roads opened up about 100 BC. They not only developed trade, but also important cultural exchanges.
The Silk Roads used to cross Xinjiang. In 1298, Marco Polo claimed he passed this way in the famous travelogue that bears his name.
This desert is reported to be so long that it would take a year to go from end to end. And at the narrowest point, it takes a month to cross it.
Over 5,000 miles separate the Mediterranean and the China Seas. But the Silk Roads from the Middle East and India were not really roads at all.
And I can assure you that no one can tell the way they have gone, because the wind covers their tracks with sand. So there is nothing to show where they have been, and the country looks as if it had never been traversed by man or beast.
Profit from trade with China was so great that every hardship was overcome. Proof has come from great cities built on the Silk Roads that were buried or lost till recent years. Gaocheng in the northwest of China was one of these harbors in a sea of sand.
Merchants passing here considered Kaohsiung a lifeline, but they also exchanged goods and built businesses here.
Yes, this made it a political, cultural and economic centre linking China and the West. It was truly an international hub.
17 different languages have been unearthed here in documents.
Although these cities nowadays look like rough watering holes for traders, archaeology tells another story. Every delicacy was available from grapes to melons, thanks to an ingenious water supply. Flowing through these cities was much more than commerce. Artifacts recovered from these deserts have proved an astounding link. 2,000 years ago, Buddhism came along the Silk Roads from India and was totally absorbed into China.
The Grand Altar was at the base of the tower. This style of architecture came along the Silk Roads from outside China.
Yeah, and you can see niches where Buddhist statues used to be, getting smaller towards the top.
Perhaps as extraordinary as the forgotten cities are numerous cave temples found recently along the Silk Roads. These at Bezeklik are typical. More and more evidence is emerging of a wonderfully creative period of exchange.
Look, Idris, the pictures on this side mainly feature the popular classical Buddhist stories, while on the ceiling of the cave are pictures of 1,000 Buddhas. But there, in the rear of the cave, we can find very different pictures. They tell us a different story.
The further Buddhism traveled, the more it gained Chinese characteristics.
The faces in the central group look very Chinese, right? It shows us how Buddhism and Buddhist art was being changed as it entered China.
The fabled Silk Roads are giving up their secrets. Here was a hugely important highway of both ideas and trade, and over 2,000 years old. But this was by no means the only doorway to China. Today on the Chinese coast, in Fujian, it is hard to imagine this as one of the busiest ports in the world. The harbour is by the modern bustling city of Quanzhou. But from under these streets, the pattern of the past is emerging. The work is led by archaeologist and director of Quanzhou Maritime Museum, Wang Lianmao.
The Silk Road by land was very popular for centuries, but many wars made that route very dangerous and difficult. Then, with the development of the shipbuilding industry, the sea routes developed and trade was carried on ships.
Many tombs of the former maritime merchants have been unearthed.
This one is okay, but that one there is much better. Look, you can clearly see the quotations in Arabic from the Quran. So this proves that an Arab community lived here in the Song and Yuan dynasties.
It's now known that the first mosque in China was built by Arab traders before the death of Muhammad, the founder of Islam, over 1,300 years ago. The descendants of the traders from the Middle East can still be found in Quanzhou. They've intermarried and become Chinese. All are called Ding because of an imperial decree introduced to distinguish Muslims.
The splendid city of Quanzhou is the port for all ships that arrive from India. The total amount of traffic entering and leaving this port is a marvel to behold. For you must know that it is one of the 2 ports in the world with the biggest flow of merchandise.
In 1485, a printed copy of the Polo Travels changed the world. It inspired Christopher Columbus. In 1492, he sailed west across the Atlantic to try to reach China. He wanted a direct route to break the domination of the Arab traders, blocking the eastward route from Europe. Almost 100 annotations in Columbus' copy of Polo's Travels show the European excitement about China and trading ports like Quanzhou.
Between the 12th and 14th centuries, this was the most famous port in the world. It was the most international city in the world. So many foreign people, so many ethnic groups all coexisted in this city. How did they mix with one another? Where do we find the evidence? Well, we can clearly find the proof from the religious artifacts we have collected at this museum.
Family tombstones were carved in Arabic and Chinese writing. This reads in Latin, "Here lies at rest Bishop Andrew of Perugia, 1332. He built one of 3 cathedrals in Quanzhou."
Just look at the Christian tombstones. Some have Greek crosses on them, some have Persian symbols, and others have Egyptian designs. At the famous Buddhist temple here, the Kaiyuan temple, we have something extraordinary. There are Buddhist figures with wings, but wings are a Christian symbol. So here, Christian angels were used in Buddhist temples.
Records show Buddhist monks from India also came by sea. Out of all the mix of faiths in the ports, it was Buddhism that was to spread and make a profound impact across China. Inside China, traces can be seen of a transport network as great as anything Rome built. Carvings alongside many ancient roads show how Buddhism flourished as it spread. This sculpture at Luoshan in Sichuan symbolizes the scale of Buddhist influence. There are repeated references in Polo's Travels to the Buddhists.
The Buddhists have many abbeys and monasteries, all full of statues of various forms, to which they make sacrifices and do great honor and reverence.
Across the country, Buddhism still thrives, as it does here at Mount Ermei in southwest China. Abbess Yen Se has run Fuhu Temple for 10 years. No expense has been spared to build this Luohan hall. Money came from Buddhists around the world. These 500 statues of disciples of Buddha help Buddhists to find spiritual inspiration. Across the country, archaeologists and scholars are researching why in China Buddhism forgot its Indian roots. Professor Ge Jianxiong is a leading historian in Shanghai.
Chinese people transformed Buddhism. That's why Buddhism is not seen as a foreign religion. It became completely absorbed and mixed with Chinese culture.
This classic Chinese symbol, in fact, has its origins in India. Buddhism provides the proof that ideas carried in alongside trade can make fundamental changes in China. Buddhism had an enormous effect in reshaping Chinese culture through its music, painting, poetry, theater, and sculpture.
The Buddhists have a vast quantity of statues, and I can assure you that some are as much as 10 paces in length. Some are of wood, some of earthenware, some of stone, and they are all covered with gold and of excellent workmanship.
Remarkably, you can still see very clearly how Buddhism, once established in China, was modified and became a Chinese religion. Today, this is how temples are built in China. But the building methods being used were already ancient when Buddhism arrived in China 2,000 years ago. This temple is being built on Mount Ermei. It is one of 7 holy Buddhist mountains across China.
There was no special design, and there was only this simple wall plan. We use the skills passed down from our forefathers. It's really rather simple.
Buddhism had a big influence on the Chinese, but our research shows that it took a long time to spread through China.
The reason was that Buddhism challenged some fundamental ideas of Confucianism. Confucius lived 2,500 years ago, and his teachings have always been the dominant influence on Chinese thinking and behavior. For example, the emphasis placed on family life by Confucius was challenged by Buddhism. Joining a monastery meant renouncing family life. So how did Buddhism become accepted? A key factor was imperial support. Many emperors saw no conflict in combining belief in both Confucianism and Buddhism. But emperors also found patronage of Buddhism a useful way of bolstering their legitimacy and enhancing their prestige.
Buddhism was very popular in almost every dynasty up to about 200 years ago. Its popularity had a lot to do with imperial support. That was why Buddhism spread across China.
Buddhism was to go much further than just changing China. Inventive Chinese monks found a way of satisfying religious needs that changed the face of information technology. Abbot Huaiqing does what monks have done since they first arrived in China. Each copy he makes of a text brings more religious merit. Paper had been invented in China before Buddhism arrived. But the demand for copies of scriptures triggered a second invention, which, with paper, changed the world. The earliest printed texts in the world looked like these. Some printers still store thousands of wood blocks. Books printed from these are admired for their beauty.
So, Mr. Liu, what are these ones?
These are a collection of ancient art books. These printing blocks were carved around 300 years ago. Look, the carving is fabulous. Here we have every topic, including poetry, astronomy, and geography.
Buddhism spread to Korea and Japan. In Asia, printed books were widely available centuries before Gutenberg published his first in Europe in 1458. This Buddhist book tells us it was printed in 868 AD. That makes it the oldest ever found. It was discovered at Dunhuang on the Silk Roads, where temple caves hid an extraordinary library of thousands of books and paintings. Citrus fruit and the technology of paper and printing came by the Silk Roads to Europe. Across these deserts, a vast two-way exchange of ideas and trade helped shape today's world. But But centuries before polo, merchants knew that China was much richer than all of Europe.
As for the merchants, they are so many and so rich and handle such quantities of merchandise that no one could give a true account of that matter. It is so utterly beyond reckoning.
Just as they commanded the sea routes, Muslim traders from the Middle East came to dominate the Silk Roads. At their terminus in Xi'an, their descendants still pray in the Grand Mosque. In 742 AD, a census in Xi'an recorded a population of 2 million. There were also 5,000 foreigners, many from the Middle East.
Abraham begged God to let him leave the area. Today, I will preach on 4 points. They all cover lessons from the life of Abraham that I did not complete in my last sermon. Every Friday, all these Muslims come here to listen to the word of the Quran to help them become better people.
Today, across China, there are an estimated 20 million Muslims. Their trading links are forgotten, but extraordinary new evidence of their past influence in China is emerging. Professor Liu Xingyuan is an archaeologist who's made some surprising finds in Jingzhoujian in southeast China.
There was a time when Islamic metal candlesticks were made in Arabia. This is a porcelain copy. We can compare them in this book. The size is identical, but the porcelain copy has Chinese designs. Otherwise, it's completely Islamic.
Since 1982, Professor Liu has unearthed over 20 tons of smashed porcelain. He thinks there is much more to be found, as in some years, imperial orders exceeded 100,000 items.
Emperors demanded the very best quality. So huge quantities of rejects were smashed, as it was forbidden to let ordinary people buy it. So the buried remains here form a very rich archive for study. To restore them and put all the pieces back together requires the work of several generations of people. This group won't accomplish it in their lifetime. Look at these young men. They came to work for me when they were young. Now they're all married. Even when their hair turns white, they still won't be able to complete the work.
The imperial records also reveal continual exchange of technical know-how. Cobalt blue in the decorations came from Iran.
We Chinese didn't use big bowls like these. Chinese people only use small bowls. But there were many big bowls in Islamic countries like Iran and Turkey. Through imperial documents, we can prove that these bowls were made for the Islamic countries. Muslims like sitting around a big table using big bowls. They use these to make it easy to eat the food with their hands.
Marco Polo marveled at how porcelain and other fragile goods were carried throughout China.
I give you my word that I have seen in this city fully 5,000 ships at once. For I assure you that the river flows through more than 16 provinces, and there are on its banks more than 200 cities. There's a huge canal of great depth and width, linking river to river and lake to lake, and it affords passage for very large ships.
The exports from harbours like Quanzhou were so much greater than the Silk Roads that some called it the porcelain sea route. Silt choked the harbour at Quanzhou, and the glory of Chinese sea power faded, till archaeologists like Wang Lianmao got to work in recent years.
The compass was invented in China and first used here. That encouraged Chinese shipbuilding and navigation to become the most advanced in the world.
Some of the ships, that is the bigger ones, also have 13 bulkheads, for the bulkheads are so stoutly built that the compartments are watertight.
Inventions like the stern rudder spread across the world. 7 great voyages reaching the Red Sea and down to southern Africa were led by a Chinese Muslim, Zheng He. His ships were 20 times the size Columbus used to cross the Atlantic, and a century earlier.
鸣炮升起，列队欢迎。
But such official Chinese expeditions were rare. Some now argue that despite the huge flows of trade and many Chinese inventions traveling to the West, China was never really open.
Did China take the initiative to learn advanced foreign ideas, especially in terms of culture and systems of government and other knowledge? The answer is no. Having an open door was used by the Chinese emperors and people to patronize foreigners. That is why foreigners were called barbarians.
But not everyone agrees with this analysis. Some historians interpret the evidence as showing China was an open society.
The ancient Chinese were open-minded. They have never rejected learning about new and better things from foreign countries. That was why Jingdezhen became a porcelain capital.
Here was a civilization that never dreamed it could be challenged. The Chinese invention of guns and gunpowder reinforced their sense of superiority. China's doors remained open, but in 1368, the Ming dynasty started down a road that would end in disaster.
The first emperor of the Ming dynasty rejected the previously open attitude to foreigners. He was inward-looking. He saw no need for foreign trade. He felt that China was a vast country which could satisfy all its own needs.
But some emperors were persuaded to listen to the outside world. In the 16th century, Jesuit Christian missionaries arrived with a fresh approach. They nearly made a big impact, but only a few converts remain, like here in Shanghai.
When the Jesuit missionaries came, they adapted Catholicism to suit China. They learnt Chinese, wore Chinese clothes, and adjusted their religious rules. The Chinese accepted Catholicism. But when the Pope in Rome learnt of the changes, he objected and insisted that strictly Orthodox Catholicism be applied in China. The result was that the emperor forced the Jesuit missionaries to leave China.
In Xinjiang, the search for more clues about the past continues. Professor Idris is himself a Muslim, descended from traders who passed this way. So what is his view of the openness of China?
It depends on different periods of our history. Sometimes China was open, sometimes it was closed. But overall, it was more open than closed.
By the 19th century, the emperors adopted a policy to cut ties with the rest of the world. China's doors closed. Even unofficial exchanges with other countries were forbidden. Little by little, China became shut off and isolated.
So why did some Chinese rulers close their doors? Why, after being for so long the most powerful economy on earth, did China cut itself off from world trade?
Indeed, for a very long time, China had the most advanced cultural, economic, and political systems. But this encouraged a sense of superiority. The Chinese thought that China was the center of the world and that China was the most civilized place on earth. This is why they thought there was nothing to learn from foreigners. People consider that the Great Wall, the city walls, and walls around homes are symbolic of Chinese culture. But these walls can also be a symbol of China's closed society. When China became backward, the Chinese still thought they were powerful, and that brought disaster.
Decades of chaos, war, and revolution brought China to its knees through much of the last century. Then, in 1949, Chairman Mao reunited China with communism. But this was a Western political idea. Did this herald the start of a new openness?
One of Mao's most famous remarks was, "Combine the theories of Marxism with the reality of China." He strongly criticized the concept of dogmatically adopting foreign ideas wholeheartedly. And what did he do? After 1949, did the implementation of many policies have anything to do with Marxism? No. In reality, only the parts that were suitable for China were used. So, here is more evidence that China was not an open society.
And China remained closed. The spirit of exchange of the ancient Silk Roads was dead.
"23 years ago, when I first came to Xinjiang, the conditions were pretty bad then. It was said that Xinjiang was a place where ghosts cried and beasts howled. Many people believed that this place was the desert of death.
The desert of death is in Xinjiang, where the old Silk Roads crossed. So what is a former communist official doing on these seemingly desolate roads?
The relationship with the USSR was pretty tense, with China closing her doors on the outside world. But not long after I came, China adopted its open door policy. The doors were wide open. Everybody was allowed to trade with the independent states of the former Soviet Union.
At the same time, oil came gushing from under the Silk Roads.
In the past, our ancestors achieved a lot. They created the Silk Road, through which China traded with foreign countries. But now, following the development of our modern economy, the export of oil will be the symbol of the Silk Roads of the future.
Wang Benyan is a reincarnation of the daring traders who once trekked along the Silk Roads. In under a decade, he's become a multimillionaire. He will trade anything that turns a profit, from oil to fashion. Fashion shows on the Silk Roads are now as common as trading containers with Russians.
What's the maximum quantity you can supply to us, say, over the next 6 months?
It depends on how much you can take.
We supply 5 countries in Central Asia. We need 40 containers a month delivered through the Black Sea.
We can deliver all you need within days. We see an increase in the amount of wool and cotton that we import. We will also take as much quality scrap as you can send us.
These iron roads now roll right through to Europe. Wang's base is the city of Urumqi. The Silk Roads have become multi-lane highways. Almost 700 cities now spread across China symbolize change over the last 20 years. Mao's successor, Deng Xiaoping, opened China's doors and inswept capitalist ideas. In his last journey to the south of China, he urged on free markets with his slogan, "It is glorious to get rich." Cities like Shanghai took him at his word. Ideas and trade rolled in like a tidal wave.
The right approach would be to let Chinese and Western culture coexist. It seems that Western culture is found everywhere in China, challenging and attempting to replace unique Chinese thinking. But I don't think that Chinese ideology and thinking will easily be changed.
So what is there to prevent China freely absorbing ideas, even when its doors are seemingly wide open? The answer may be the power of centuries-old Chinese thinking, which is still valued today as a practical guide to life. Both military and business thinking are still heavily influenced by one ancient theory.
The book, called The Art of War, has been in existence for over 2,500 years. With its logic and wisdom, The Art of War has had a significant impact on Eastern military strategies.
The origins of the art of war are uncertain. It is probable that it was written on bamboo strips in 512 BC by Sun Tzu. It has been the foundation of Chinese military thinking ever since. Colonel Liu Chuanzhou lectures at the elite State Staff College that grooms the next generation of generals.
Our teaching of the art of war must be suited to modern needs. Then the past will serve the present.
The art of war offers timeless strategies for victory, such as knowing the enemy and knowing yourself, tiring out your foe before attack. It offers a complete philosophy, that can be applied equally in business or warfare.
The art of war is not just about the detail of winning a battle. It summarizes the rules of conflict. It is very general, so it can be applied to all kinds of human activity. That is why the art of war can be used in both military and business life.
In the mountains and deserts of the northwest, Wang works and plays hard. But like many, he looks to the art of war to guide his commercial success.
If we want to achieve something, we need more than plans and goals. We need a complete strategy. So we have used Sun Tzu's art of war to develop our information system and high-tech strategies. In this way, we have won and expanded our markets. Doing business and relaxing complement each other. So I encourage my employees to work hard as well as relax in whatever country they're in. In this way, they will have a broad vision and lateral thinking.
Like millions in China, Wang relies on much more than one source of ancient thinking.
Buddhism taught me how to be a civilized man. An abbot gave me part of the Buddhist scriptures. I was lucky to meet him at his temple and was grateful for what he gave me. Every word in the scriptures says I should be good-natured, I should have integrity and be reliable. When you are equipped with such virtues, you will be able to establish reliable partnerships. With trustworthy partnerships, you will be able to expand your business.
Today, there are 1,300 million Chinese, carrying a mix of modern and ancient beliefs. The vast majority have no religious belief in a Western sense. Indeed, all religions were regularly suppressed, as they fell in and out of favor with rulers during the past few centuries. State approval of some religions came with the open door policy. These are the Dings of Quanzhou visiting their ancestral tombs. Until the open door, Muslims had to hide their religion. The young take some convincing about their past.
Can we be both Muslim and Chinese?
Well, our ancestors were Muslim Arabs. They came here to trade. When they got here, they gradually formed a new ethnic group.
Am I a Muslim?
Of course you are. Generation after generation, our religion was passed down. But we're Chinese now. Because of the hard-line policy of the past, all our ancestral graves were destroyed. After the open-door policy, we pointed out to the government what had been done to our graveyards. In return, we were given this piece of land so that we could renovate the Ding family ancestral tombs.
Religious suppression over the last 50 years was severe. Rebuilding their religion will take time. Only the Imam has learned to read the Quran in Arabic.
وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين. الحمد لله رب العالمين.
When their religion was suppressed, the Dings got by as farmers. Now they're back in trading.
We were all farmers then. Our hands were covered with calluses from heavy farm work. It's 10 years since we started the factory, but I still have the calluses. In the past, there was a terrible shortage of shoes in the country. To buy a pair of shoes, you first had to get a voucher. I was only a farmer and knew nothing about shoemaking. But several of my partners sold their valuables, and some sold their pigs.
We started with only $600 US. Now we have an annual output of 3 million pairs of shoes. We sell over 80% of our shoes in the domestic market. We export the rest to Russia and Eastern Europe.
Across China, millions of farmers have developed village industries. The Chinese have telescoped into 2 decades, what took centuries in the rich industrial countries.
In 10 years, we intend to build a shoe factory 10 times the size of this one. That will make shoes to an international standard because by then we'll have high-tech production.
Quanzhou was the busiest port in the world 1,000 years ago. Now, up the coast, Shanghai is in the race to regain the title. China is a cultural melting pot once again. Even German opera is included. Containers carry sets for the Flying Dutchman. In the multilingual musical team, the conductor stresses his interpretation of Wagner in German.
Just listen to me. I want the chorus to use their emotions to express freedom. We will do it once more with total concentration.
The city provides the building, while the theatre director works closely with businessmen who sponsor performances.
I've been talking to the expatriate community here in Shanghai, so don't worry. They've promised to send out a fax to all the foreign business associations to publicize the opera.
Yeah, you have to stay there, not so that the angle is towards the conductor.
You develop a great culture only when you exchange ideas with others. Since China opened its doors, Shanghai has seen many more exchange opportunities, especially in the area of performing arts. In recent years, more and more events are being staged, particularly since the completion of this new opera house.
Whatever the culture or ideas, including communism or capitalism, they will only be used in China after they've been adapted using Chinese characteristics. But then, they will have become something very different from what they were originally in the West.